So today we have Dr. Tribhuvan Singh Bisht, Deputy Program Manager in Solid Waste Management at Center of Science and Environment. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So we'll dive into the questions now, the number of questions. What actual is e-waste, electronic waste, and how is it becoming a global challenge today?
Yeah. So e-waste is basically all the electronic products that either uses a battery
Right.
or needs a socket to operate, and after it reaches its end of life or its intended purpose is done, then it becomes an waste. So we call it as e-waste. The growing problem of e-waste is huge and it is fast evolving. Just for context, in 2022 itself, around 62 million tons of e-waste was generated globally, and this figure is expected to rise to 80 million tons by 2030. What's more scary is that the rate at which the e-waste generation is, it's almost around 5 times more than the rate at which the formal recycling infrastructure is growing across the countries. That is there. And if we talk about the recycling, globally around 20%, only 20% is the recycle, 23 to be precise, 23% is the recycling, formal recycling. And going by this rate, by 2030, will actually, the recycling capacity will reduce to 20%. So this problem is huge.
Right. So I want to know what are the causes of e-waste? I mean, what could be the considered causes or the reasons? I mean, why e-waste is, why is it becoming a very fastest growing waste stream in the world?
Yeah, so there are multiple reasons to it. There's psychological reason, there's economic angle, then there's technological reasons. So as you know, in today's
If in specific I ask you at an individual level, then what would you say?
Yeah, so when we talk about technology, you see the technology is growing at a rapid pace. So the items that we used to use are getting obsolete at a quicker pace. Just for example, in mobile phones,
Right.
now we are getting upgrades every year.
Right.
And they releases heavy softwares every year, which requires high processing capacity. So the older phones, they kind of become, they become laggy. They are not operating at their optimal capacity. So it forces the consumer to, to switch to newer phones. And
right.
the older phones, it becomes a part of an e-waste. So that is there. Apart from technology, then software development we have covered, and then there is also psychological reasons. Nowadays, e-waste nowadays, if we talk about the electronic gadgets that we are surrounded with, are becoming a symbol of status and all. So having newest newest iPhone or the latest phone is becoming a necessity rather than it is a need.
Right.
So and these are the major causes.
As you mentioned initially about e-waste, that it's growing and by 2030 it will be more than 80 million tons, right? So out of which only 20% or 23% is recycled. So what about the rest? The rest, the stuff, the e-waste that is there, where does it go?
So yeah, as you rightly pointed out, if there's 23% recycling, then we are left with 77% of the e-waste. There are different routes through which it goes. Majority of it is the informal recycling that is done by the informal actors, and apart from that, you'll find a lot of e-waste, especially in the developing countries, in the dump sites. So they are lying there from n number of years, maybe decades or more than that. So and this is where the rest of the e-waste is lying. If I highlight the Indian context, according to CPCB, we have around 1.4 million tons of e-waste as of 25. However, there's this issue that CPCB estimates this total e-waste generation based on how based on what data producers report on the EPR portal. However, there's only 106 electronic items that are covered under this, and there are a lot of items that are way beyond these items. And there are various unbranded electronic items, like you go past the metro station, you'll have people standing with unbranded electronic items. They are selling that. So the unofficial account or the report suggests that India generates somewhat around 4.4 billion. That is almost 4 times what is the government is reporting.
So I want to know that is e-waste generation is a manufacturing issue. I mean, are companies deliberately creating, you can say, the technologies, or maybe in a way that we are compelled to buy new stuffs, buy new electronics, and then we discard the stuffs we carry?
In general, when we talk about e-waste, there's a
I,
general.
I, I want to know,
Yeah.
I would like to add on, is it a manufacturing based issue or a consumer based issue?
Yeah. So, generally, we tend to think that e-waste is a consumer-based issue, since many of the individuals are having multiple phones, gadgets, and
Right, right,
whatnot.
right.
But there's like a deeper problem. I'll give you an example. iPhone 6 was launched in 2014, I guess, and in 2016 my sister gifted me that iPhone, and I used it throughout my PhD. And when I got into my first job after my PhD, somewhat in 2023. Now, within that period, there were apps which was whose support was removed because
Right.
iOS upgraded. Then the supports were removed, Google Pay and others. I was somehow managing. And when I joined the job, I needed Google Maps, and Google Maps was not supported. So I was forced to change my phone, even though it was physically in a very good condition, and it could have been, I could have used it for long. So this is also, this is what the brands or
The
brands are
company
doing, the
itself.
companies are doing. They are having physical obsolescence. It is when your hardware deteriorates fastly, like the batteries nowadays. Sometimes earlier you used to have batteries. You used to have the cover. You can remove it. You can replace the batteries, and now these are all embedded. You cannot open it. So it has become relatively very harder to repair the products.
True.
Secondly, the software obsolescence. Like every year there is an upgrade. Even there's an upgrade. So the lower version gets obsolete. This is how this is obsolescence. And apart from that, they are making it very hard to repair the current item. The cost of repair is getting
Exactly.
higher than
Right.
what the price that we purchase. This is especially prominent in the developed countries, but it is slowly transitioning in India as well.
In developing countries as
Yeah.
well. Since we mentioned about the recycling part and the remaining thing, I mean, where does it go? I actually want to know that where does those discarded electronics, when they leave our home, so where do they go? They do, I mean, do they only go to the dumping sites, the landfills, or where?
Yeah, so I'll tell you one ideal situation and the reality that is there. In the ideal situation, when a product, electronic product that is no longer in use to me, it should go through a formal channel. It should be collected through reverse logistics. After that, it should go to the registered recyclers, wherein they will, in control environment with proper safety equipments, they'll dismantle the product. After that, they will, they will extract metals and gold, palladium, silver,
Right.
these kind of valuable materials. And after that, whatever environmental hazards that is there, the flame retardants and other, they'll be disposed of in a safe manner. This is what we known as, we call as urban mining, and that is prominent now. But in reality, what happens is only a very small fraction goes through the formal channel. I'll talk about the informal channel. So now, if we generally say that the the formal channel is limited because the informal actors or the players are much more easily accessible. They come to our home, they'll take it, they'll give the cash, and it is instant process, right?
Right.
And once it goes to the small scrap dealers, or we say the kabadi walas, then it flows through a channel, and it reaches the informal recyclers.
Right.
What happens in informal recyclers is that they first dismantle the product through brute force, because it is an informal setting. So they dismantle the products, and after that they need to extract the valuable
Metals.
metals from
Right.
that. For for precious metal like gold and silver, they need to have acid baths.
Right.
They'll need to have hydrochloric acid, nitric acids. They have to have these combination, and they'll have to dip it, and this happens in open. So there'll be the circuit boards are being put into this acid bath,
Without any
and
protection, without
yeah,
any.
without any protection, anything. So the fumes that will you'll inhale is very dangerous to your health. Talking about Delhi, Seelampur is very famous for this e-waste recycling market. Earlier, it was used to do all the extraction of metal itself, but due to law enforcement and another, it is now only limited to dismantling of the products. Now the recovery of products has shifted to outer limits of Moradabad and Loni itself. So there they are having all these kind of things. Even you would have seen that in Moradabad there was a study done. The area around the recycling units, the PM10 concentration was above 250 ppm. That is on a higher level, and they also did the blood test of the people that was involved, and their lead and nickel concentration was 20 times higher than that of the safer limit. So this is the level of pollution that they are surrounded with. And recently you might have heard the news that Loni is one of the, not one of the, but it is the most polluted
Right. Area.
city
City in
in the
the
whole
whole
world.
world. Yeah.
So there are a lot of reasons to it. One of the most prominent reason is this e-waste recycling that is happening in that area, which is contributing to the entire overall air pollution.
I want to ask that why such a small percentage of e-waste is being recycled? I mean, why is that? Why you just mentioned 23%, 20 to 23%. Why is that happening?
So yeah, so basically there are few reasons to it. One of the major reasons is that there's lack of collection centers for collecting the e-waste. If we talk about India, there are around 2,800 collection centers for all over India. We have almost 2.5 times more the cities than the collection centers that we have. So first is the collection centers are very limited. Secondly, the informal sectors are much more accessible. So now we are living in India that has Zepto 10-minute deliveries, Zomato, Swiggy and all. So we prefer convenience over anything. In e-waste recycling, so the informal sector comes at the home, they pick it up, they give cash, and no paperwork, nothing is there. So it is very easy to, that is why major of the e-waste is flows through the informal sector.
And okay, right, rightly said. And with that, I want to know the consequences or the environment and the health consequences that comes along with e-waste. I mean, when it is not properly recycled, what could be the health consequences? I mean, how it impacts our health, and to what age group of people you can specifically, if you can mention.
Yeah, so if we talk about e-waste, first let me tell you the market size that is it has. In 2022, the electronic waste was valued at $91 billion US dollars. That's huge. And the thing is that when we are not able to kind of recover the e-waste and recycle the e-waste, there are two environmental issues that are at large. First is when we are not collecting it, that means it is either going to the dump site or going to the informal
Channels.
sectors. Yeah.
Right.
So informal sectors, we have talked about the hazardous condition that they are working in. Once it reaches the dump site, what happens is it is laying there for n number of decades. Now what happens is through thermal and physical deterioration and through the moisture that is present within the dump site and also the rain, what happens is the water percolates from the top of the dump site to the ground. In between that, it comes in contact with e-waste and other types of waste that is there in the dump site. So it the water extracts all the pollutants from the e-waste, like your lead, chromium, and all. And once it does, it reaches the ground, it pollutes your soil, and
Right.
after that it infiltrates down and it pollutes your groundwater. So it causes both soil and water pollution. And also you might have heard in the summers that there's fires in the dump site, and if there's a fire in a dump site and there's e-waste lying so that is burning in open, so it is also contributing to the air pollution that is there. And when we talk about the environment, the health hazards, it is it disproportionately affects the younger population much more. By younger population, I will say the children's below the age of 12 years, because their metabolism and their immune system is evolving, and it affects them much more than what it does to the adults. And the general problem that they have are the respiratory diseases, neurological disorders, then reproductive issues, and then there's an increase in cancer rates among them. So these are some of the issues, health issues.
And this is all happening because the waste itself has entered our food chain, right? I mean, through soil, through water, because the people, the hazardous condition in which people are recycling it, people are extracting the metals out of it, that is extremely dangerous.
Definitely.
Right. So I want to know, is this particular waste, is e-waste is primarily driven by individual consumption habits, or it's just a systematic design? I mean, which has been going, or industry practices?
Yeah, so
I mean, are we just used to switching on to newer mobile phones, newer technology so quick that we don't even think about its waste? We open our drawer and we see, I mean, old chargers, 2 to 3 mobile phones kept there for long, and we're not doing anything of it. We are not consciously thinking of what we'll do of the old phones or the stuffs we already have, and rather we are switching very quickly to the newer technology, newer phones. So is it just about frequent upgrading? I mean, have we normalized it with the upgradation of technology, or it's something else as well?
yeah, so it is a combination of both. People are now normalizing upgradation to the latest versions and all, but there's lie a deeper cost to it. It is the brand that are forcing the consumer to keep on constantly switching. Through, as we talked about, they are upgrading the softwares, and they are intentionally making the older versions become laggy, become slow.
Right.
Then the consumer are forced to
To newer
switch to the newer
versions.
versions.
Right.
Then and now the consumption pattern is also kind of changing a lot. Earlier, when you see in your house, maybe 20-30 years back, you used to add CDs, DVDs, and maybe fridge, microwave oven, and a phone, right? These were the e-waste that was there. But now what happens, as the technology has advanced, now we do not require DVDs and others. So we have apps for it. Then for storage, we store things on the clouds. There's not much need of hard disk and others. So however, with the advancement of technology, we think that the e-waste should decrease, but it is actually increasing because the consumption pattern has changed a lot. Now, if you see the electronic gadgets that you have in our house, you'll have smartwatch, you'll have the smartphone, then you'll have other essential items. Apart from that, now there's a concept of smart homes. You will have Alexa, you'll have electric locks and all whatnot. So the consumption pattern has shifted drastically, and it has led to more per capita consumption as compared to the
And
earlier
so do the
versions.
contribution. So like, as we know, the major contribution to the e-waste is being done by the higher society group. I mean, the ones with the ones, I mean, for example, if I'm able to buy a new phone, if I can upgrade my technology really quick, so I am actually accounted for that e-waste, because the more I upgrade, the more I even leave behind as well, and so do I have to, I mean, maybe throw or whatever. So why is there a disproportionate equation between developed countries, the first world, and the third world? I mean, the problem is being created by somebody else. I mean, they are bearing the brunt. So, what would you say about this?
Yeah, so waste colonialism is something that is very prominent and very evident in the real world itself. If we just look at the per capita consumption of e-waste or the generation of e-waste, I would say, in Norway or developed countries, the per capita generation of e-waste is somewhat around 27 kgs per capita per person, yeah, per
Right.
capita, right?
Right.
Whereas in India, it's somewhat around 6 to 7. So there is a drastic difference. However, even if you see in the global south, these numbers are low. However, majority of the burden is being faced by the global south
Global
countries,
South.
right? So the issue is that in the developed countries, the cost of recycling is very high. Even in the developed countries, when you give your e-waste to a recycler, you actually have to pay. Rather than we are used to receiving,
Right.
but you have to pay, and then the labor is costly.
Costly.
So they find it much cheaper to kind of transport their e-waste from their country to the global south, and also the environmental hazards that comes along with the processing of the e-waste is there. So this is there. The global south countries, they have cheap labors. They have laws that are not stringent enough to prohibit
Use of yeah,
the transboundary movement of this e-waste.
e-waste.
There's this Basel Convention where they limit the movement of the hazardous materials in the country. But what the developed countries are doing, they are disguising it, like the ultimate goal is to dispose of their products into the global south, and since there are treaties and there are rules which prohibit that, so they misbrand it. So they use terms like second hand, they use terms like reusable,
Right.
and wherein actually the situation is that most of that are not can't be used again.
Used to.
Only a fraction of that can be used again, and that is disproportionately affecting the global south population. Like in India also, we have very strict regulations regarding this e-waste, importing of e-waste. However, there was this, but we are still receiving a lot of e-waste. Mm, on a global context, if we say around in 2022 itself, around 5.1 million kgs of e-waste was being transferred between the countries. Of that, 3.3 million kgs were transferred from the global north to the global south. So this is a very huge quantity. In India also, there are rules are strict, but and the companies are finding ways to import or export the e-waste to India. There's one digi scrap operation also that was done, and in that the e-waste was disguised as aluminum scrap. But when when the raid was done, they found that it was all old computers, PCs, circuit boards, and all that was worth more than 23 crores. So this is how they kind of try to bypass the channel.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, these were the credible insights from Dr. Tribhuvan Singh Bisht on electronic waste. Stay tuned for such more conversation and keep watching DNN.